Welcome back to Real Estate 101, where today we're going to continue our discussion on home renovations and talk a little bit about the permit process. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Daniel Ott of Artisan Contracting. Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, so what's involved exactly in the preliminary investigation?
So before I start designing for anybody, once they've hired me to do designs, is I go to the local municipality and I look into the zoning bylaws and the restrictions that are in place for their particular property. And I find such things as how close we can build to the property lines or how high we can build. And sometimes there's pretty specific bylaws as to one I've run in recently where there's an eavesdrop height restriction, which is way lower than the peak roof restriction. So it really limits how you can design the house.
So you talked about designing. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, there are many different facets to designing, and a lot of the interior stuff has nothing to do with the permit process, so we won't touch on that today. But the designing that does have to do with the permit process can still be broken down into two main categories of architectural and also structural design. And the architectural design, with what it's going to look like from the outside and the shape of the building and the size of the building, is going to be what the planning department and some of the third-party authorities are going to be interested in. And the structural side of things, how it's built, where the supporting members are, that is going to be what's important to the building department to look at.
Okay, so who completes the drawings for the municipality?
So years ago, it could have been anybody. Anyone could do drawings and submit them to the building department on your behalf, or you could submit them yourselves. And then a few years ago, they came out with the BCIN, or Building Code Identification Number process. And so me as a designer and an architect, we all have to go through testing to obtain our BCIN so that we can sign our drawings with our number and our signature so that we can apply to the building department. However, some municipalities still have the loophole where the homeowner themselves can apply for the building department. And other contractors will use this loophole and do the drawings themselves, and they either don't have their own BCIN or they don't want to pay someone else to review and sign their drawings. So they do the drawings and give it to the homeowner, and the homeowner submits it to the municipality and makes it look like the homeowner did the drawings. Well, the building officials are not stupid, and they can tell that most homeowners don't have the software to do these drawings. Right. So I can tell you that these loopholes are going to be squashed pretty soon.
Okay, so you mentioned third party. What kind of third party authority is normally or typically involved in the permit application?
Hopefully none of them, Joe, because this just lengthens the process and makes it much harder to get your building permit in the end. However, chances are you're going to run into one or more. So the first one that comes to mind is your conservation authorities. And this happens, they'll have jurisdiction on your property if you either have a body of water on your property or near your property and the floodplain goes into your property. And the floodplains of even a small trickling creek can be quite large. These are by far the trickiest third party to get around because they have great restrictions once they have jurisdiction on your property. The next one to think about is the Niagara Escarpment Commission, the NEC. And most clients, when I talk to them, think that the NEC is going to be the hardest thing to get through. But from my experience, it's typically the easiest. I try to design within their parameters in such a way that I can email even preliminary drawings to them and obtain a letter that says we don't need to apply for an official permit from them. So there are ways around some of these things, even if they have the jurisdiction on the property. And then third, if you're going into a minor variance, and we'll talk about that a little later, you're going to end up having to discuss things with all kinds of other city departments. This includes the fire department, the street lighting department, the parks department, and even the sewer department. Believe it or not, there are a few houses here and there scattered throughout the municipalities that are still not hooked up to the city sewers, and these are like downtown properties. You may ask why? Well, years ago when they put the sewers in, they gave the homeowners at the time a choice to connect or not. But to connect cost money, so a lot of people decided not to connect. And over the years, a lot of those buildings have been connected, but there are still a few that are not. And the problem is, I believe they started tacking interest on in day one. So where it would have cost $1,000 before, it now costs $15,000. Right. So it's a lot more expensive. However, if you're going to be adding to your house or tearing down and rebuilding, it's an absolute must. They won't let you get a permit without doing it first.
Okay, so I thought it was the planning and building department. Is there any difference between the two? And what is the planning department responsible for?
So in certain municipalities, such as Burlington, for example, it is two separate departments. The planning department and the building department are even on two separate floors of City Hall. In other municipalities, such as Mississauga, for example, it is literally the planning and building department. It's one department that you go to, but within the department themselves there is separation and they're responsible for different things. So the planning department is responsible for such things as the bylaw of the city and making sure that your suggested house or building is going to be within the bylaws of how wide it has to be or how tall it has to be. And then if it doesn't meet those bylaws, they're also responsible for the minor variance that you may have to apply for. And this may not be very expensive in the grand scheme of things, but it does take a long period of time to get all of that passed. Next, the planning department is also responsible for a thing called site plan control. And this is not in all municipalities, but it is in a few of them. And the easiest way of explaining this to clients is that site plan control, basically, heritage protects the entire city, or whoever falls under that. Okay, and there's different ways of how you actually fall under site plan control in different municipalities, but in Burlington it's for how large you're building. In Mississauga it's for what area you live in. And site plan control, they basically take a look at your drawings and they walk up and down your street and they look at what you're building out of materials, how you're doing it, what kind of facade you're going to have, i.e. stucco or siding, and they even look at what colors you're using, and they want to make sure it's going to blend in with the neighborhood.
So everything's consistent.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, so now that you've gone through all these steps, can a homeowner start their permit application?
Yes, and this is by far the easiest part of the entire permit process. And when I first talk to clients, this is what they think the whole permit process is about, but there is all that background work that has to be done first. And it's written right inside the Ontario Building Code that the City Building Department has 10 days to get back with you with an answer of either a building permit or a no. And so 10 days later, hopefully you have your building permit.
All right, Dan, so any last tips for viewers of our show on the permit application process?
Absolutely. Even though anyone can apply for your permit, please hire a professional to do it for you. It is my experience that hiring a professional will cut your permit application time in half. All too often, I have met people, homeowners, at the building department or the planning department, and they have been there for years, literally up to 3 years, trying to get their building permit. And imagine the frustration after all of that. I've even had my own client where I took over for them after they'd spent 2.5 years of their own, and I got the last little bit all quickly done, and the only thing they had left was the 10 days of the building permit. And they called me and said, Dan, we're canceling the project. We bought another house. We just can't take it anymore. So please, hire a professional, save yourselves the headaches, and get your house built faster.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much for coming on today's show, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next month.
Thanks for having me, Joe. And if any of you are going to start a renovation project or are thinking about it or are about to apply for a permit, give me a call. Let me help you out.
So there you have it. If you're about to embark on a big home renovation project, get in contact with Daniel Ott of Artisan Contracting. I'm your host, Joe Terceira. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.